Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an electronic version of the Judicial Branch. Where you want to be in your packet right now is at the very first page. You should be able to see this triangle and the title, which is the Federal and Virginia Judicial Branches, America's Court System. Now, what you see here is already a pretty busy and information-filled flip chart screen. And when we're all done, this is what it's supposed to look like. And the trick to it is to knowing everything on this page. You're going to have to be able to know what all the words mean, what every level of the court system is, what type of trial ends up or starts at any one of these given levels, and where it can end up. So I'm going to walk you through it as carefully as I can so that you can understand each one of these words and what all these symbols mean. And that way you'll have at least a beginning understanding of the judicial system. It's kind of like if you were maybe a amateur lawyer or somebody who is in law school, you would at least need to have some basics on how the court system works. And that's what you're going to have right here. Since this information is now visible to you, let's go ahead and write down some things. And as you're writing, I'll try to explain. Maybe the best thing to do is to write what I tell you to write and that you write it down as I tell you. And I'll tell you what it is you're writing. Okay? Well, I have chosen to indicate the judicial system here as something that looks like a triangle or a pyramid. And as you can see, it's got a bunch of levels. The yellow and the green represent two major levels, and then within those levels there are levels. So let's start from the bottom up and write down the different levels, and of course we'll also learn a memory clue on how to remember those levels. So we'll start down here with the Virginia district. You don't really have to write the word state. I would write the word district off to the side just like this. So Virginia, and your state is Virginia, and you're going to write district right on that bottom line. Okay, so anything in that green section of the triangle is going to be a state court. It might be where you have to go for a trial, let's say, and we'll talk about what types of trials they are in a minute. If you disagree with, before we start out with that, let's say wherever the court starts, you're going to have a special phrase that you need to know. And let's say I'm going to fight a traffic ticket. Then I'm going to put this arrow right here at the district court level because that's where my case is going to start. It's going to start right here at the Virginia District Court. The reason why it's going to start at the Virginia District Court is because this is the level that hears traffic tickets. And so since it originates at the Virginia District level, we would say that the Virginia District Court has original jurisdiction in cases of traffic tickets. Now, if you look up here, and if you don't have that written on your paper, which I don't think you do, let's take a moment and write down the definition for the word jurisdiction. Okay, any jurisdiction is the right of a court to hear that case. It is the right of a court, the authority, sometimes you could say, of a given court to hear that case. When we say hear it, we mean like put it on trial, to consider it. So there are really four different types of jurisdiction that we have to learn in this unit. And the first we're going to talk about is original jurisdiction. Excuse me. And that is where a case begins. Any court that can hear a case first has original jurisdiction. So let's go ahead and write original jurisdiction, maybe where you see your arrow on your paper. We can write the word original jurisdiction. And we're going to write original because that's where the case begins. In other words, it originates there. The word origin is the key word, the root word. It starts at the Virginia District Court. We'll talk about other types of cases that might begin there in a minute. Now, let's say I disagree with the decision of that court. Let's say they found me guilty when I was innocent, or my rights had been violated, and something went wrong with that case. Well, then you can ask the next level. Let's move our arrow up. You can ask the next level of the court to hear your case, and that's going to be the Virginia Circuit Court. The Virginia Circuit Court. And you can see right here on this arrow going up, what you did when you went up the court system is you appealed the case. You asked a higher court to hear that case. So where you have the word appellate jurisdiction, right there with the arrow going up next to the triangle, if you can fit it in somewhere, let's say appellate jurisdiction, and I've got that written right here. That's the right of a court to hear a case on appeal. We'll take a moment to write that. The right of a court to hear an appeal. So far we have two forms of jurisdiction. If the case starts at a court, we say it has original jurisdiction. If the case can be heard by the next court up, we say that court has appellate jurisdiction. The right of a court to hear a case on appeal. Well, I can keep going. Let's say I disagree with the circuit court and I feel like my rights have been violated. I can then appeal to the Virginia Court of Appeals. The Virginia Court of Appeals. So go ahead and write that one on the next line. The Virginia Court of Appeals. And then the highest court in the Virginia court system is the Virginia Supreme Court. So that's going to be this one right here. So take a moment to write the Virginia Supreme Court. So clearly, the district and circuit court have original jurisdiction in certain cases, and the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals have appellate jurisdiction in certain cases. Let's look at the type of cases. We're going to write them down. Look at the type of cases that each court gets to handle. As I said, traffic tickets are tried at the Virginia District Court level. Let's see if I get this right. Virginia District Court level. But there are other kinds of cases too. The Virginia District Court also hears misdemeanor cases and family cases. You have domestic violence or divorce cases. And they can also hear minor lawsuits, anything under $10,000. Also, if a juvenile justice case comes up, that would be anybody under 18. That would be heard in the Virginia, what's called General District Court. Okay? So that's the kind of case that starts here at the Virginia District level, and we'd say that court has original jurisdiction. That's where those cases originate. Now, something that's very confusing is that a major crime, like murder, is actually a state crime. Most criminal law, not about 90% of criminal law, is state law. So a murder is actually tried first at the Virginia Circuit Court level. And we know that a murder is a major crime because it's punishable by more than 1 year in jail. And the word we use to describe any crime where someone can go to jail for more than a year is a felony. Also, if there's a lawsuit that's more than $10,000, it's going to start at the circuit court level in Virginia. So we could say that the Virginia Circuit Court has original jurisdiction in felony cases. If a person feels that their trial was misheld or the jury wasn't fair, they could then appeal to the Court of Appeals and eventually to the Supreme Court of the state of Virginia. Here's something that's pretty tricky, and I think you should write this arrow in. If a person wants to appeal beyond the Supreme Court of the state of Virginia, they don't go to U.S. District, even though it's connected on our chart. They have to follow this arrow, and it then jumps all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. So draw an arrow going from the Supreme Court of Virginia to the Supreme Court of the United States. I like to say it's from supreme to supreme. Okay, so we've covered two types of jurisdiction. We've covered two types of cases. In this case, we're talking about both. Now notice that your triangle has a line right down the middle. And that's because you've got two types of law, two areas of law that can go to court. It could be a criminal case. It can also be a civil case. And I think we all understand what criminal means. Criminal means that a crime has occurred. So under criminal law or near criminal law, let's write the words misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor is a crime punishable by less than 1 year. It literally means bad behavior, misdemeanor. So less than 1 year. And a felony is a major crime, anything punishable by more than 1 year. So write those definitions in if you can find room. Now, the harder part to understand is civil law and civil cases. This is where someone has basically committed a wrong against you, but has not really committed a crime. So here are all the words that you're going to need to know that are associated with civil law. Let's write these down next to the words civil law. Anytime someone has wronged you, then you basically say, I'm going to take you to court because I have a dispute with you. It could be somebody didn't pay you rent, someone hit you with their car, someone didn't follow through on a contract that they signed. If you end up in court, then you have basically filed what's called a lawsuit. And that is what is the main part of civil law. It's basically lawsuits. And there's also a special area of civil law. It comes from the Latin word meaning wrong, and that's called tort law. So if you want to make some money as a lawyer, specialize in tort law. Tort means wrong in Latin and French. And it basically is when you're suing somebody because they did something wrong to you. Maybe not broke the law, but committed what we call a civil offense. All right, let's look at cases that go to federal court. We've been talking about cases that go to state court down here in the green area of the triangle. But now we're going to talk about cases that start in federal court. So we're going to move our original jurisdiction arrow up to U.S. District. Let's go ahead and write U.S. District. And it's called U.S. District because it's one of the 94 districts of the federal court system. Here, take a quick look. All those squiggles that are inside these states are the districts that are within the federal court system. There could be a judge for each one of these little squiggly areas, and there are 94 of them. The colored areas are what we call federal circuits, and there are actually 13 federal circuits. And so this next level, the U.S. Court of Appeals, is what these colors represent. They're the 13 federal circuits. So that's this level right here, the Court of Appeals. The squiggles inside the colors are the districts, and then the colors themselves are the Court of Appeals. But if you want to appeal your federal case because you feel like your rights have been violated or because some aspect of the Constitution has been violated in your case, you would end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. So let's look at the type of cases again. I want you to write them down. So any case dealing with a federal law. So if Congress passes a law, let's say you can't make fake money, right? You know what that's called? That's called counterfeiting. Well, you've broken a federal law because it deals with money. Let's say you commit treason or terrorism. Those are laws that violate, those are crimes that violate laws that were passed by Congress, not by the Virginia General Assembly, but by Congress. They're in effect throughout the United States. So those are what we call federal crimes, and you would start out at the U.S. District. So we would say that the U.S. District Court has original jurisdiction in all federal cases. And then the Court of Appeals would hear that case, and then it would end up at the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court can choose not to hear a case. If it chooses not to hear a case on appeal, then the lower court's decision is what stands, whatever the Court of Appeals decided. Let's say, for example, here's the Ninth Federal Circuit, and someone sued the federal government saying that the president's travel ban was unconstitutional, that their family could come from, say, like a place like Iraq, that it violated the 14th Amendment of equal protection. So the Ninth Federal Circuit heard that case, It's usually a panel of 3 judges. And they said, you're right. The president's travel ban violates the Constitution. Now, the president could certainly appeal to the Supreme Court if he wanted to, because it deals with the issue of equal protection under law in the Constitution. So he could go then to the Supreme Court and have them decide. If they said that the Ninth Federal Circuit heard the case correctly and made the right decision, they could choose not to hear it, and the lower court, their decision would stand. All right, there is something you should know about the difference between criminal law, and civil law. And remember, every level of court can hear either one of those types of cases. That's why this line goes from top to bottom. Well, here's the thing. If you are being tried in a criminal court, the jury has to be convinced, what's called beyond a reasonable doubt. That would be about 90% sure. So if you're, being tried for murder and there's maybe more than 10% doubt, the jury has to come back and find you not guilty. Here's the 10% beyond a reasonable doubt. But if every juror is sure, remember, there has to be all 12, a unanimous decision. Then they come back and say, yes, we have found beyond a reasonable doubt the person is guilty. And that is in criminal court. But it's not, it's actually a little kind of like easier for the, maybe it's harder for the defendant, easier for the prosecution. Remember, the prosecution is the people who are trying to prove you guilty. In a civil case where someone has committed a wrong, they only have to show a little bit more than half percentage that you did it. Now, you wouldn't be found guilty. You'd be found responsible. And in the case of O.J. Simpson, who was found not guilty in a criminal case in California for the murder of 2 people, he was found responsible for their death. We don't say their murder. We say he was found responsible in what's called a wrongful death case. And they only needed 51% of the evidence to show that he had committed a wrong against Ron Goldman, because he was responsible for his death, but he was found not guilty for his murder. So that's the difference between criminal and civil. It's the difference between committing a crime and committing a wrong. Here, because the death penalty could be involved, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And certainly someone's liberty is at stake. But here it's going to be money. If a person is found responsible for a civil offense, they're going to have to pay what we call damages. It could be compensatory damages. It could be punitive damages. But they're going to pay money. And that's what O.J. Simpson had to do as well. So let's make sure we have every piece of information on this screen that we need to know for the judicial branch. I'm going to click over the answer key. Let's see what we missed. Right. One thing that we missed is the memory clue. And we've got a couple other items. So let's jot down a couple things. First, let's make sure that we know all 7 levels. If you have to go to federal court, you will be SAD, S-A-D. So if you bolden that or do a different color or underline it or write it separately, just make sure you know that if you have to go to like U.S. District Court, you're going to be in the D of SAD. So S-A-D. But if you have to go to state court, like in Britain, you might get fired. They say, hey, yes, you're going to be sacked. So let's write S-A-C-D. Make sure you bolden that or you do a different color. So if you have to go to state court, you might get sacked. So SAD and sacked. Now you notice those check marks. They are actually very important. So let's write down who might hear your case at every level. All right, we're going to go to the bottom. We're going to go to Virginia District. If you get brought into court, say, for public drunkenness, that's a misdemeanor, you're going to go up in front of a magistrate judge. Now, he's going to be on the SOL test. So make sure you write down magistrate judge. And there are federal magistrates, too. They're the ones who do the work of the court. They issue subpoenas and summonses. They hear your plea or decide what your bail is going to be. So first, you're going to go up against a magistrate judge. If you're being tried for a felony, let's say, you're going to be in front of a jury of 12 people, what we call a jury of your peers. So that's why that check mark is there, because it's also true on the U.S. District Court level. And you've got to memorize that U.S. District Court and Virginia Circuit Court are the jury or trial levels. So I put it all together in one big memory clue. I say, SAD, sacked in D.C. That's not D.C. like District of Columbia. It's district and circuit. So keep that in mind. SAD, SACT, and DC. When you get in the SOL test, write down all your memory clues, and one of them should be SAD, SACT, and DC. Why do you have to know DC? Because those are the two levels where you are going to be tried by a jury. It is a panel of judges for these appeals courts, and once you get to the Supreme Court of the United States, 9 justices will hear your case. Okay, there are 9. So the closest decision might be a 5-4 decision. That's what you need to, have a majority in the Supreme Court. Let's say it was a tie, 4-4. One guy's sick, he doesn't vote. Then whatever the lower court decided, that's what stands. If it's a 4-4 decision in the Supreme Court, whatever one of these appeals courts, one of these circuit courts decided. And notice which one you live in. You're up here in Loudoun County, so you're going to be in the 4th Federal Circuit, just like me. I'm in Maryland. If I'm going to sue the federal government, let's say, or if my trial deals with the Constitution, then I might end up in the 4th Federal Circuit. That's going to be this level right here. Then I can appeal to the Supreme Court. As I look around, I think that's it. We can also bring it up in flipchart so you can actually take a look at it a little more carefully. And I'm going to ask you to do the next activity. But you've now got the basics, and it's going to be important that you understand each level, each type of case, each type of jurisdiction, and the difference between criminal and civil law. So now's the time to start getting your feet wet with it. All right, good luck. Thanks for paying attention.